Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Mr. K is Wrong. And if you don't know the premise of this little podcast, which won't be that surprising, it's about somebody that I knew in my high school days who, you know, was a right winger, and I spent a lot of time debunking his stupid Facebook memes. And some of them are real whoppers. And I'm going to do a little bit of a reveal here that might give a hint of who he is. He was an educator. Okay. So he went really far down a right wing rabbit hole. And I mentioned that he was an educator because he should know better. This is about him failing to understand some of the basic facts about how the United States government works. And in this case, it's about how actually the founders gave courts power over the president. That's something that apparently a lot of right wingers don't understand. And it's either that or they don't, want to publicly understand that they're playing ignorant, they're playing dumb, perhaps. So, this is based on a right wing meme that Mr. K shared. It depicts Pam Bondi and it says, "Spine of Steel Bondi tells judge to pound sand, says admin will follow the law instead of crony judge." And below that additional text reads, quote, "If the founders wanted the courts to be able to constrain the executive branch, why did they not give the courts that power? And why did they explicitly observe that the power does not belong to the courts in the Federalist?" The answer is that the founders didn't want the judicial branch to be able to overrule the executive branch, which is exactly what the courts are trying to do at this very moment. End quote. So that's blatantly incorrect. And blatantly incorrect. So Mr. K, who again is a former educator, is basically lying or playing ignorant or some combination thereof because the meme distorts history and constitutional law in some very crucial ways. So, in reality, the founders absolutely intended for the courts to check the executive branch. The U.S. Constitution establishes a system of checks and balances among the three branches of government. Article 3 grants judicial power to the courts, allowing them to rule on the constitutionality of executive actions. The idea that courts can't, quote, constrain the executive branch, unquote, is completely false. So Mr. K is completely false. He's full of crap. And judicial review was established early in American history. So it wasn't just like an afterthought that came out in like 2025 or something like that. No, it was an early part of American history. In Federalist number 78, Alexander Hamilton explicitly defends judicial review, stating that courts have the power to declare void any law or action that violates the Constitution. And this principle is firmly established in Marbury versus Madison, a case from 1803, which confirmed that courts can invalidate executive actions that conflict with the law. And if anyone out there disputes that, go ahead and let me know, like what your evidence is or what your argument is, because again, it is the law. It's pretty plainly stated in the U.S. Constitution. So if you are trying to side with Mr. K, Well, I think you're full of baloney. And the meme misinterprets the Federalist Papers as well. The claim that the Federalist Papers deny judicial power over the executive is misleading. The founders debated how much power courts should have, but they agreed that courts must act as a check on both the legislative and executive branches. Hamilton even described the judiciary as the quote, least dangerous unquote, branch precisely because it would only exercise judgment, not force or will. So, in other words, it is intended on being a check on the will of the president and, of course, other people in power. So, courts routinely overrule executives when they break the law, or at least they're supposed to. That's another dynamic here. Even if they don't, the idea is that they're supposed to have that ability. So, from stopping unconstitutional executive orders to blocking overreach, courts have a long history of holding presidents and officials accountable. If the courts had no power over the executive, the president could act as a dictator without legal consequences. And unfortunately, we are in a situation where the president is trying to act as a dictator without legal consequences. So the voting population is going to have to try to create some consequences if the courts aren't able to remedy these situations. They're going to have to vote and protest and do things like that. So I guess when it comes to that meme, you've got to ask, is it a spine of steel or just somebody ignoring the law? You know? In some ways, it could even be said that Pam Bondi is spineless because she's unwilling to say anything critical of Donald Trump. If Pam Bondi or any official ignores a court order, they aren't standing up for the Constitution, they're defying it. Following the law isn't optional, even for the executive branch, or at least it's not supposed to be optional for the executive branch. So the meme pushes a false narrative that ignores basic constitutional principles and actual history. The courts absolutely have the authority to check the executive branch, and ironically, because so many right wingers claim to be constitutional originalists, concerned about what the framers, the founding fathers would have wanted. Anyway, it's ironic because of that courts have this ability to check the executive branch partly because the founders wanted them to. So, Mr. K is wrong again. It would be quite interesting if he was actually correct about anything at this point, but he seems immune to being correct about some of the basic facts about how government works and frankly how freedom works or anything like that actually works. As I just talked in a recent as I just talked about in a recent episode, he doesn't understand that one of the basic principles of freedom is that, you're going to occasionally have people that you consider weird out there who dress in ways that you don't really necessarily understand or agree with. But, that's one of the prices, one of the costs of having a free society is that people will sometimes, engage in styles or behaviors that you might not understand. And in this case, I guess it's a judge actually doing their job, which Mr. K does not understand either. So I have yet to see anything that really suggests that Mr. K understands how the world works or how, the government works. Yet he's acting like, oh, he's such an expert on how the US government operates. So, really, what he is a cheerleader for a wannabe dictator. So that means he has to sort of bend his will to the will of that wannabe dictator. And he has to play dumb and share stupid memes on Facebook. And it's really a weird thing to see, especially from somebody who was, again, an educator. But that's the tragedy of living in a post-truth world. You can just make up stupid shit and act as if it's, the absolute truth.